For the first part of the data analysis assessment, I began by stating the three objectives that I was using in the graph, and then I also explained how the average above each objective was formed. So I took all of each student's grade, and then for each objective, and then averaged that out to get the overall class average per objective. And then I kind of explained the organization of the graph, so the three objectives and then the class average. For the whole class assessment average, it was pretty low. So for each objective, I gave a bit of reasoning as to why I thought that the students performed so poorly. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get real life data from my lab experiences, so this was a bit difficult for me. But I kind of just used this knowledge I had from what we learned in class and in previous education classes to form some educated guesses as to why my students might be performing poorly on these assessments. And then I also discussed some information about geometry itself, because the math assessment that these students were taking would have been my geometry assessment. So I talked about how when students are first learning geometry, it's a bit difficult to grasp this concept because in their previous math classes, they're learning about more equation and formula type math. So this could be a little difficult to kind of get in the groove of things. So that could have added to the poor grades that they were getting. And then for part two, I talked about the focus student who I believe was probably below grade level math, or wasn't able to receive necessary accommodations to give them an equal opportunity for success in this test, because they performed really low in all three of the objectives, making like D's and F's. My suggestion for this focus student would to kind of have a parent-teacher conference, because I think it would be important to kind of get an idea of what the student's going through at home, because it could affect study habits or give a little bit more information about why they may not be doing well, because they could be a new student, they could need testing accommodations but can't afford to get tested. So I thought that was important to incorporate. And then for part three, I kind of talked about how I think it would be beneficial for the whole class to kind of relearn some of the information and content, because overall they did really poor, and moving on without reviewing information wouldn't be smart, because if they're learning new information that's built upon the principles they learned in this assessment, they're not going to be able to do well because they don't know these building blocks, so they won't be able to work up. So I thought it would be important to review that information and make sure there's an understanding. And then I also talked about a little bit how it was difficult to kind of get some specific new step direction, because I wasn't able to get real life content from my labs. But I think it was beneficial because I kind of learned how I can work around that, because we may have students who are coming in the middle of the year where we won't have other teachers or previous assessments to go off of. So it could be beneficial to kind of learn how you can work to build the knowledge of your students despite not having all the information you necessarily need to make it an easier process.